let's start with this counteroffensive on the part of Ukrainian. They were talking about it for a long time. They were they were they were prepared for it, but it's not going the way they want it to be. Why they're failing in this counteroffensive?
The simplest answer is they are conducting this as a political attack as opposed to a military attack. And what do I mean by that? A conventional military offensive would not be accompanied by months of announcements that, oh, we're going to be attacking. Here we come. Get ready. We're coming after you. We're really going to hurt you. It's the best way to conduct an offensive is to sucker punch somebody, hit them when they least expect it, surprise them. So all of this talk that was being done in advance of the start of the offensive was motivated by the need to generate support, political support in the United States and in Europe for continuing to send money and weapons to Ukraine, as well as to provide training. So that was really what was going on. Now, the other part of this is that these Western military planners apparently genuinely believed that Russia was a brittle, worn out force, that the army was poorly led, that it was filled with people who had been forcibly conscripted into the army, that they had a gun held to their head, more or less, that they were very poorly trained, very poorly led, very poorly armed. It shocks me, but that is clearly what even former four-star generals like David Petraeus and Ben Hodges and Mark Hertling, all these clowns, were saying such things on television about the Russians. So when Ukraine launched this attack, they ran up against a well-trained, well-prepared military force that was better armed than the Ukrainians and has as good as, if not better, intelligence than the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians are relying solely, almost exclusively, I guess I should say, on U.S.-supplied, NATO-supplied intelligence. The other problem they had is that instead of being subjected to one training regimen, in other words, let's say that they sent all 6,000 Ukrainians that they were going to train to Brazil. And so in Brazil, they would be subjected to the training by Brazilian military personnel. So at least they're getting, they get the Brazilian version. But what happened was these Ukrainians were sent, some to the United States, some to Great Britain, some to Poland, some to Germany, some to Italy, some to France. They're going to, according to Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he claims that they were actually sent to 33 different countries. I find that hard to believe, but he said it, I didn't. And so when you get that many different training masters, it's a recipe for confusion. It does not create cohesion. It doesn't create unity. And the essence of a military, by virtue of the term uniform, meaning all the same, instead of creating something that was a uniform, it was anti-uniform. And to top it off, instead of having one kind of firearm or weapon system to learn, the Ukrainians were using multiple systems, some former Soviet, some former Russian, some French, German, British, American, and just because it can shoot an artillery round, for example, doesn't mean that it operates in the same way. So when you add all of that up, this was a a recipe for disaster, and it's turned out to be a disaster for Ukraine.
Larry, we know that the first army of Ukraine that was trained and equipped by NATO during 8 years, 2014 till 2022, was defeated. Some experts like Scott Reeder say by September 2022 they were defeated. They were out of game.
Right.
How I don't understand how they're thinking of it. This is the third army of Ukraine that was trained by NATO. How, as you described it, it's something like pieces of puzzle that doesn't fit together, and they didn't receive enough training from the NATO. How they were thinking of this counteroffensive with all these bugs inside this training procedure?
Yeah, they're just the preoccupation for them is politics. It's all about placating or maintaining support of a domestic political audience, as opposed to doing what makes sense from both a tactical and strategic standpoint. And as with each, I forget the name of the movie. There was a movie some years back with Michael Keaton, and he was able to create clones of himself. And so with each creation of a new clone, it degraded, it deteriorated. So finally, like at the seventh iteration, the new Michael Keaton clone was almost retarded, mentally disabled. That's sort of what's been happening to the Ukrainian military. That, as you correctly note, and as Scott has noted, between 2014 and up to 2021, Ukraine was participating annually in military exercises with NATO and the U.S. European Command. And they did have some stability in leadership, the ability of the lieutenant colonels, the generals, and even the majors that to develop the skill of learning how to do combined arms. So those were casualties early in that first iteration, first phase of the war. They suffered significant casualties. And so then they're put in the position of having to recruit new bodies or grab people from the Territorial Defense Force and compel them to put the uniforms back on. And yet, a lot of these people they did not have training, a training level that was just a matter of providing refreshing training. And so they with a shorter time window to operate in, they get shoved to the front line, they get killed. And then Ukraine is having to go back to the well and find more people. So what's happening is, instead of having a system in place where you bring in recruits, you put them through the basic training, which is usually at least a 3-month training, 3 months, 1 week, and then put them through another 3 months of advanced individual training, and then another month or two of unit training with a larger organizations, say their battalion or brigade, or even up to a division. Then you put them out into action. Well, Ukraine doesn't have the luxury of that kind of time, and it doesn't have the manpower pool compared to what Russia has. So it's operating with all these disadvantages and having to rely a lot on foreign forces. So it is, with each succeeding iteration, you've got lower quality both of the frontline troops and of the military leadership. The people that are now put in charge to lead and command these larger organizations, larger troop movements, just don't have the experience and depth that their predecessors did.
Larry, let's assume that they have enough manpower and enough training, which wasn't the case. Let's assume that. But without air support, they would be able to do anything on the battlefield.
Yeah, well, we're into The start of the modern era of warfare really began with World War II, except what limited us people in World War II was the ability to collect intelligence and what they call intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, ISR capabilities, coupled with the integration of computer and networks and communications networks that were not possible technologically 80 years ago. So that now comes to the battlefield, and it's really changed the face of war and made it more imperative that an army that's on the offense have not just artillery, both fixed and mobile, tanks, armored personnel carriers, but also electronic warfare capabilities accompanying them, as well as mobile artillery, as well as fixed-wing aircraft that can provide close air support, as well as rotary wing aircraft that can also supply close air support and attack capabilities against opposing forces. In addition, rockets, cruise missiles, drones, it's a whole panoply, and it has to be, as you use the metaphor of a puzzle. It's lots of different pieces that have to be properly put together in order for it to make a coherent picture. What Ukraine is doing is trying to fight such an operation without the combat aircraft. Whatever they have is extremely limited both in terms of numbers and in capability, what it can do in the face of robust Russian defense systems. They virtually all of their helicopters are gone. So right off the bat, they start at a disadvantage. Then they don't have the mobile air defense systems in sufficient numbers to force the Russians to have to change their aviation tactics. In fact, the Russians have been freer to use combat air in a way they were not able to do so a year ago. So when you sit back and evaluate it, Ukraine is, they're in an oxy match and they've got at least one arm cut off. So they're fighting with one arm against somebody that's got two arms. They're not going to win.
Do you see any? Today, Zelensky talked with BBC News, and he said that this is not a movie. We are doing whatever we can do. But do you think is it going to be a counteroffensive? It seems like a suicide on the part of Ukrainian. I don't know the mindset of Zelensky, what he want to do with these forces. He's killing literally young Ukrainians.
Yeah. Well, they've got to recognize, deal with Mother Nature, deal with time. Historically, when the Germans invaded Russia in 1939 and then restarted their offensive in 1941, they started in June. They started in June for a reason that, the spring rains have eased up. The fields are not as muddy. The roads are a little more stable, and they can handle the tank and truck traffic, as well as provide for the movements of troops. And you've got this window of June, July, August, and then into September. And then in September, it starts to change. And the rains start and the mud fills back up. October becomes almost impossible to move into November until the winter comes and freezes the ground. So it's not like Ukraine can say, "Oh, we're just going to wait till September." There's some talk. I've heard one of their advisors talk about, "Oh, we'll do it in September." Way too late. So what I do find fascinating is we know from conversations or the punditry of General David Petraeus on June 6th, he described what he anticipated was going to happen through the Ukrainian offensive. Basically, a blitzkrieg, a lightning strike that would take in which the Ukrainians would break through the Russian lines and reach the Sea of Azov and split, just an embarrassing loss to the Russians. Well, that would have required the Ukrainians to traverse at least 3 intact defensive lines or belts. They didn't even reach the first one. But that goes to show that that's what the Western planners fully expected, and it didn't happen. So now they got to figure out what to do next, because one, they've suffered terrible casualties, both killed and wounded. My understanding is that the dead are now in excess of 10,000 just from this 2-week operation, which is an enormous amount. Then on top of that, when you look at the loss of tanks, the last number I saw was approaching 250 tanks. Well, those are not easily replaced. There's not a tank factory that's just cranking them out, as happened during World War II. Ditto, the same thing for armored vehicles, Bradley fighting vehicles, Strykers. So the whole host of the different vehicles that were provided by France, Germany, Finland, Sweden. So Ukraine has to figure out a way to re-equip itself. And the question that's looming is, with recession becoming more of a reality, particularly for Europe, will the European governments have the financial means and the political support to continue to write a blank check for Ukraine? I don't think so.
You see, recently Putin had a meeting with African leaders. He showed some documents that were signed by Ukrainian in March 2022.
Mm-hmm.
That they were negotiating. They were reaching an agreement during those peace talks. Why do you think that the West, the collective West, and the head of it, the United States, decided to go to war with Russia instead of negotiating in those days?
They want to destroy Russia. They want to eliminate any actual Russian national control of their own country. It's one of the most base imperial ambitions we've ever seen. There is no foundation of belief in the West for having peaceful coexistence with Russia. The West has laid out what I'd call non-negotiable terms, that Putin must go, and that Russia must abandon its nuclear weapons. That basically, they want Russia to roll over and allow itself to be raped, to put it in crude terms. But that's exactly what's going on. And Russia naively believed at the start, back in a year ago March, when they were negotiating with Ukraine, I think even at that time they still harbored hope that they could deal with Washington, deal with NATO, and reach a reasonable agreement. Well, what they've learned since then is that all the negotiations surrounding the Minsk agreements 1 and 2 were frauds. They were completely fraudulent. They were done as a tactical means to try to buy time to rearm Ukraine. It was not at all a sincere effort to promote peace. And then when the United States and the United Kingdom directly intervened in the negotiations last March and April and sabotaged them, and basically forbid Zelensky from moving forward with those negotiations. So at this point, I think Russia has finally awakened to the fact that the West cannot be trusted at all, that there is no basis for negotiation. To have a negotiation, at a minimum, you've got to have the belief on the part of both parties that there are some common things they can agree on. This is I see no foundation for such agreement.
You see that the media, how the media plays a big role in this whole situation. You
Yeah.
see, they're making Zelensky like a hero. As you see, the Naftali Bennett, he from Israel, he had an interview. In that interview, he was talking about the discussion he had with Putin. He said that after he's asking Putin if he's gonna killing Zelensky, he said no, he's not gonna killing Zelensky. Then he contacted Zelensky after that meeting, telling Zelensky that he's not gonna kill you. Then he was not in his office because he was afraid of Putin killing him.
Yeah.
He came back and filmed himself in his office that no, I'm not afraid of Russia. You know how fake a statement can be. I don't know if we can call it a statement, but how you can call this man a hero in this whole situation, as the
He is.
mainstream media does.
Yeah, he's a social creation. Um, he really is sort of a reflection of, let's call him the modern pop world, the pop phenomena that can be generated and created by simple repetition, imagery, and messaging. The combination of those, because Zelensky, his career, he's an actor, a comedian. Not a very talented one, but he was able to make a living at it. When he was initially running to become president, in much the same way as with Donald Trump, few believed that he could actually succeed, but he did. It turns out he succeeded because he had the backing of a wealthy Ukrainian oligarch, and this oligarch, by bankrolling Zelensky, gave him some credibility. Zelensky then promised to end the war in the Donbass, and had he followed through on that, you wouldn't have this war going on today, and you wouldn't have approaching, I think, 170,000 dead Ukrainian soldiers. He has become totally a creature, a puppet of the West. He is like a drug addict, dependent upon his pusher to supply him with a new batch of narcotics. And instead of narcotics, it's dollars and it's military equipment. Zelensky also is reputed to be a cocaine user, a regular cocaine user. I don't know if there's any truth to that or not, but he just, his actions have not been critically examined by the Western media. So, for example, his attack upon the Eastern Orthodox Church, and he's attacked it as a tool of Russia, and looted, basically backed the looting of these cathedrals and these churches, monasteries. He's banned opposition political parties. He's banned opposition media. So he's conducted himself very much as the kind of tyrant that he accuses Vladimir Putin of being. Putin has not banned opposition political parties, and Putin has not locked up opposition press, by contrast. So yet the media is just, it's become a tool, a propaganda tool, nothing more.
You see, I talked with Jeffrey Sachs on my podcast. He said that after the coup in 2014, they invited him to help the government that came after the coup. And he said something so amazing, that there was an NGO, a US NGO there, was describing him, this guy, how they managed the coup in Ukraine. How these NGOs working to get under the skin of a position in these countries. How do you see the role of NGOs in this something like these coups, these color movements?
Yeah, the color movements. Yeah, I'm fast. I've been trying to go back and when the term color revolution first emerged. it was sometime in, I think, 2006, 2007. The use of these so-called non-governmental organizations, they're front companies, the vast majority of them, where they receive money from the U.S. government, and instead of it coming directly from the CIA, it'll be laundered through, say, State Department or some other federal agency, and to fund these activities, and yet the activities they'll engage with are clearly, in many cases, undemocratic, or just to overthrow or subvert a government. And yet, if you try to attack those organizations, like one of them is in the Balkans. It is called the Organized Crime Corruption Reporting Project, I believe, and it's funded by the U.S. State Department, a large measure. It also gets money, I believe, from George Soros, and it's ostensibly there to investigate corruption and all the evil things that the Russians are doing. But it's news with a slant, and it comes with a particular point of view, and it's not objective, in my view. But to use those kinds of organizations as a means for both organizing people, providing the money to sustain those organizations, and to carry out particular acts. So it is pretty pernicious. These are not independent organizations. I think the key question that always ought to be asked is, who's funding this if it's a genuine non-governmental organization, that's one thing. There's Samaritans. There's a group called Samaritan's Purse, as an example. That's run by Billy Graham Foundation, or the Franklin Graham. That's not funded by the government in any way. It's entirely funded by people who make direct contributions. Those kinds of NGOs have to be separated from ones like the National Endowment for Democracy, which is funded by the U.S. government.
Yeah. We see what happened, how many failures we need to see to finally understand these wars they're not gonna lead to anything good for us. We had the war in we remember Daniel Ellsberg said, he passed away just recently. He said that the Vietnam War was a kind of war that could be avoided. That we didn't need this war. It didn't do anything good to the society of the United States, to the Vietnam. Then we had the Iraq War, Afghanistan War, Libya. All these wars are killing innocent people. Or these people who cannot live in their country, they have to flee. They have to immigrate to other countries. The same thing is happening to Ukraine. Why the United States is insisting on this foreign policy to go in these wars that they're just making devastation. They're destroying the very texture of society in those countries.
Yeah. Well, it's all about money, frankly. You've got this military-industrial complex that has become so dominant in the United States, and the only way it stays alive is it has to grow. And how does it grow? Well, it grows by producing weapon systems, from aircraft carriers to the F-35 strike fighter, to cruise missiles, to artillery shells, to everything that the modern military needs. The problem, though, is that once you've created this, you got to use it. And the United States has been constantly going out and looking for a reason to use this military power. And the irony is it's using its military power against very inferior foes who cannot mount any kind of credible threat to the U.S. until now, with respect to what Russia represents and China represents is something that the United States nor NATO has encountered since the end of World War II. What we've seen with the evolution of the U.S. defense budget, as I recall, I think in 1991, when the Soviet Union broke apart, the U.S. defense budget at the time was like $230 billion. It's now close to $1 trillion. So it's grown about 5 times what it was. And yet the world was not facing greater threats. They just became defined in a way that we could justify spending that money. And it doesn't matter whether, if you've defeated terrorism, you don't reduce government spending. You find a new enemy to excuse spending that money. And you raise a really important point with respect to all these different military misadventures, starting with Vietnam. We've gone into Vietnam, we've gone into Panama, we've gone into Grenada, we've done Iraq twice, we've done Somalia at least once, we're in Syria, the Balkans, now indirectly in Ukraine, and we ginned up a war, helped stir up a war in Yemen, pitting the Saudis and Iranians against each other. And when you step back and say what was accomplished, well, the world was not made safer. The world was not made more prosperous. And the world did not become more peaceful. So it's really been a perverse conduct on the part of the United States. It has been the preeminent force for chaos in the world, not for order. Ronald Reagan, which I shared with Reagan's vision from the standpoint of claiming that the role of the United States was to be the city on a hill, light, a shining light, a beacon to other nations, a beacon regarding freedom and justice and liberty. Well, that's all proven to be a lie. The conduct of the U.S. judiciary and Department of Justice in terms of corruption and cronyism rivals anything that I've ever seen in, say, Central or South America, where I've spent a lot of my career. I used to talk about the military dictatorships in places like Honduras and Guatemala. Well, the kind of corruption that's going on right now in Washington, D.C. exceeds anything I ever saw in Honduras or Guatemala as examples. So it is, the United States is at a transition period. Historically, it's a historic moment, but not in a good way, because the dominance and preeminence that the United States has enjoyed since the end of World War II is in the process now of disappearing. The United States is going to be maybe on par with Russia and China, but the continued dominance of the U.S. dollar is being challenged. And the United States gross domestic product, although people like to cite the number, oh, look how big the U.S. gross domestic product is. When you dig beneath that, it's not based upon making things. It's a gross domestic product that's based on services. And those services can easily go away or be moved. Unlike both Russia and China, who have very robust, intact industrial bases. That is a critical difference here.
I was wondering, when United States left Afghanistan, the government collapsed suddenly.
Yeah.
You see this, it was 20 years training this army in Afghanistan. Where is this army? Nobody knows if it exists or not. What did happen in Afghanistan?
Well, I mean, the, the United States harbored this fantasy that it could go to other countries and impose order and then create democracies. But without any understanding of or respect for the local culture. And anybody that understands anything about the history of Afghanistan knows that it was not, they did not have the foundation to be a functioning democracy because it's largely a tribal country for starters. And it is so ethnically diverse and that there is no common thread. The concept of even being an Afghani, that is really a Western construct. You are, you might be a Pashto before you're Afghani. So it was just, hubris on the part of the United States. That's as simple as that. They spent all this money, and the failure to actually create indigenous institutions that were stable on their own was never carried out. The United States always tried to remake Afghanistan in its own image. And again, it's like that movie I referenced earlier with Michael Keaton. With each successive clone that's created, you get a blurrier picture, a more imperfect replicant, and to the point that it ultimately becomes dysfunctional, which is exactly what happened in Afghanistan.
You see, beside this war in Ukraine, we have this conflict in Taiwan between United States and China. And U.S. called Blinken was recently visiting China. He said that we respect China, and we are not going to increase tensions in this area in Taiwan. But you see, just today, Biden called Xi a dictator. You see this kind of game. How do you see that it's gonna be a new conflict? It was a guy who is military of the United States. He's in the military of he's a colonel, if I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
He said that by 2025 we have a war with China.
Right. Well, look, what's going on here is you're seeing the complete, utter incompetence of the Biden administration in handling foreign affairs. Number one, since 1972, with the arrival of Richard Nixon in Beijing, the United States adopted the One China policy, which the One China policy states very clearly that Taiwan is not an independent country, that Taiwan is basically a province, a state of China. It's part of China. It's not independent. And as such, from that point on, the United States would no longer have an embassy and a diplomatic and official diplomatic relationship with Taiwan on the same level that we do with China. Now, the United States has also played a duplicitous game where on the side we've actually, quietly promoted independence from Taiwan. And you've seen, the most blatant examples of that were last year when Nancy Pelosi went to Taiwan and prominently met with the government and talked about Taiwanese independence. Then in April of this year, the United States announced it was sending military trainers to Taiwan. Well, from China's standpoint, they initially believed that the United States upheld that agreement of a one China policy. Now they've seen through both word and action that the United States is breaking that agreement, is rejecting that agreement. So that's why China, when they had Tony Blinken to come for meetings this last week, over the weekend, it was a very tough conversation. I mean, China gave it to them as an either or. either you're going to uphold the agreement or we're going to have a conflict. And that conflict means war, ultimately. They didn't leave any gray area. And they made it quite clear that they were serious. Now, and what's interesting is yesterday news broke, or the day before, that China is now in negotiations with Cuba to create a military base on Cuba with Chinese trainers. China's just doing to the United States what the United States is doing to China. If the U.S. can put trainers on Taiwan, China's going to put trainers on Cuba. And then if the United States wants to negotiate and get rid of those military trainers on Cuba, China's going to say, okay, fine, you get rid of yours on Taiwan. We're going to do it. We're going to either treat each other as equals, or we're going to do the same thing that you do. Only we're going to do it better. And then, as you correctly noted at the start of your remarks, that idiot Biden, yesterday in the aftermath, here's Tony Blinken basically kowtowing to the Chinese, but we say that he's is portrayed in America as a surrender or weakness. He was simply reiterating the policy that Nixon established 51 years ago. But as part of those remarks with the Chinese that, okay, yeah, we'll treat you as equals, then Biden pops off and calls Xi a dictator. So the Chinese just look at that and said, okay, whatever Blinken said, he carries no weight. His words mean nothing, because no matter what he says and what he promises, Joe Biden's going to do different. And Joe Biden's the president. From the Chinese perspective, they believe that Biden is actually in charge, which is a frightening thought, but it's true. This is, the United States has a huge problem with China. It militarily cannot defeat the Chinese, short of using nuclear weapons. And if they decided to use nuclear weapons in any form or fashion against China, Russia would use them against the United States as well. The United States will be in a two-front war that it cannot win. It does not have the military force to fight China, much less China and Russia.
You see that what the role of China in this agreement between Saudi Arabia and Iran, it was pretty amazing. You see, United States didn't want this friendship, this United States, he really wanted this animosity to going on and on, but China put it into this animosity. They're not friends like friends, but they are improving their relations. This is the performance of China internationally, that they were helping these two countries to get together, to negotiate, to put their differences aside, to work with each other. Do you see any future, the same thing that going to happen between Japan, South Korea, and North Korea, and Japan and China? Do you see anything like this for those countries?
Well, all of this is a derivative of the U.S. attempt to destroy Russia with sanctions. So when Russia started the special military operation, and looking back, I do not believe that Russia initiated the attack on Ukraine with its eye towards destroying the global order controlled and dominated by the United States. I think Russia was simply trying to protect itself because what it was seeing is that NATO forces were building up on its borders. The United States had deployed nuclear-capable missile batteries in both Romania and Poland, and so that Russia felt compelled that it had to do something. The United States, in response, overplayed its hand. It assumed that Russia was very weak, that Russia had a faltering economy that was not very large, and that the United States controlled the international currency and thereby could control the world. Well, lo and behold, they cut off Russia from SWIFT and then discovered that Russia is the only country in the world of its size that is It's the number one in terms of natural resources: oil, gas, nickel, aluminum, uranium, other rare earth minerals, that Russia literally can close its borders and produce everything that it needs to survive as a country. Food, energy, across the board. China can't even do that. The United States most certainly no longer can do that. So Russia's in that unique situation. And then out of that, instead of it tanking the Russian economy, it actually forced the Russians to start doing some things on their own that in the past they had given over to foreign interests. Well, now, so that they're doing it themselves, they're actually getting stronger economically. The culmination of this was the February summit, I believe, when Xi Jinping went to Moscow and met with Putin. And they reached a variety of agreements, many of which remain secret. But I'm pretty confident that included agreements on military cooperation and a pledge that Russia would come to China's aid in the event of an attack by the United States. And China and Russia at that point basically agreed upon a plan to create an alternative to the so-called rules-based international order, which are rules set up by Washington, D.C., controlled, dictated by America, by the United States, and one that has become increasingly a bully. We're using threats and sanctions to try to punish and coerce other smaller, less rich countries to do what the United States wants to do. No persuasion, it's ordering, it's telling, it's dictatorial is what it is. And, the nations around the world are basically, I think they're sick and tired of the United States doing this. And one of the consequences of this, as you noted, was the reconciliation of Saudi Arabia and Iran, brought about by China. Now, up to this point, the Saudis had been a willing tool of Washington, D.C., and were helping carry out, fund a war in Yemen, a civil war in Yemen that was seen as a proxy war against Iran. All of this was ultimately about weakening Iran. At the same time, the Saudis had been enlisted along with the other Gulf states back in 2012 to expel Bashar al-Assad of Syria from the Arab League, force him out, and to help fund an insurgency, an Islamic insurgency in Syria to take out Bashar al-Assad. Well, the Russians came to the rescue of Assad in 2015. So what now is happening with this reconciliation between Iran and Saudi Arabia, they've reopened their embassies in each other's country. The war in Yemen has come to an end. And so no longer is the United States, I believe, I don't have the evidence for this, but it's my opinion, that the CIA had a significant base of operation in Sudan that was being used to fund and direct military support to the U.S.-backed rebels fighting in Yemen against the Iranian-backed Houthis. So we've seen an end to that war, and we're witnessing an end to the war in Syria, where again the United States' effort to oust Bashar al-Assad is now dead. The Arab League has welcomed Bashar al-Assad back in, and I think there's a growing recognition that the United States it's weak, and it's led by a complete incompetent. I mean, when you just look at the conduct, speech, the gait, how Biden walks, I mean, it's a veritable clown show. And I can't believe any country in the world that's serious would take the United States as a serious country.
You see, I know a community of Christian Syrian here in Brazil. First,
Hmm.
I thought they don't like Bashar al-Assad. Then they said that they love Bashar al-Assad. I was shocked when they said that. Why?
Well,
He said they
well,
said
because
they said he's protecting us in Syria.
yeah, yeah, but Bashar al-Assad was not a sectarian president. He upheld religious freedom and protected the Christians against the Islamic extremists. Um, so, that was one of the reasons to hate him, that he was actually pluralistic and true to that aspect of democracy, respecting the religious freedom of all instead of favoring one group over another. And, I think your friends in Brazil, are correct in noting that's why. He protected the Christian sects.
See, Larry, how do you see this new election that's coming along for 2024? We have. I don't know if Donald Trump gonna be successful in getting out of these all kind of troubles he has right now. But we have the other candidate, RFK Jr., and I see him. He's very interesting candidate. He's making a lot of sense considering U.S. foreign policy and internal policy. How do you
Yeah.
see this RFK Jr.? Is he going to change anything in Ukraine or foreign policy of the United States?
Yes, I think if he was to gain the election and the presidency, um, he would bring that war in Ukraine to an end. But I frankly, I don't think the war in Ukraine is going to be able to last through the end of 2024. That Ukraine on its own doesn't have the money to sustain it, and so that boils down does Europe and the United States have the stomach to sustain it? The problem with the political picture in the United States right now is the Democrats, let's call it the establishment, is trying to do to Donald Trump exactly what it did to Imran Khan in Pakistan. I mean, what's happening in Pakistan and happening in the United States are very, very much very similar. And in the same way that the high court in Pakistan finally had to intervene and throw out the charges and release Imran Khan, I think that's where it's, with the charges that are brought against Donald Trump are just nonsensical. They don't make sense at all. He was president. He was the chief executive constitutionally. He had full right to classify and declassify information. There was not some set of secrets that he could not classify or unclassify. He was the supreme executive under the Constitution. So this claim of trying to accuse him of violating the Espionage Act and others is just ridiculous. It's a political act of desperation on the part of the anti-Trump crowd. But the political system in the United States is broken. It is fundamentally broken. And the danger is this. In the past, when there was economic turmoil in places like Brazil or Argentina, Colombia, or to go over into Africa or into Asia, the United States was always seen as a safe haven, a place where the money could flow, that particularly the wealthy elites could put their dollars and know that they were, quote, safe. Well, the United States seizure of Russian assets exploded that mess right away. No longer can people, especially the very wealthy, have any kind of faith or confidence that the United States is going to protect their wealth according to the rule of law. It's no longer about the rule of law. It's about who do you know. And it's really become like a third world, what we used to call third world countries, where cronyism and relationships take precedent over legal, over laws and legal procedures. So the danger is this. In the past, the dollars would flow to the United States, and the United States would maintain some measure of control over the world just by virtue of being that reserve currency. Now there's doubts about the United States and its legal system. What's being done to Donald Trump could be done to anybody. It could be done to Russians. Who's going to be the enemy tomorrow? Is it, if Lula does one or two more wrong things from the standpoint of Washington, he could be on the hook, or other Brazilians. So it's the kind of thing where the U.S., this political system, which is broken, is actually going to affect the economic system as well. It's a complete loss of faith or a serious damage to confidence that the United States has a legal system that will protect property and will protect financial assets. And losing that confidence, I don't think has really sunk in much on this side of the Atlantic.
You see how they hate Donald Trump, go after Donald Trump, and you hear nothing from Hunter Biden. Nothing, literally nothing.
Well, if Donald Trump had engaged in even 1/10 of 1% of the kind of corrupt activities that Joe and Hunter Biden have done in terms of influence peddling, money laundering, drug use, the use of illegal narcotics, violation of firearms laws, up and down, he would have been in jail, and he would have been, and correctly so. So what's happening now is, in a way that Barack Obama is a power behind the throne on a lot of this, but Joe Biden is acting in a way sort of like Saddam Hussein with his crazed, depraved sons, Qusay and Uday. Hunter's in that mode, except his father's got dementia. He's not mentally intact, and he's corrupt, fundamentally corrupt, and has been selling and doing influence peddling in Washington for years and gotten wealthy off of it. And now just one more example that they can get away with anything. It was curious that Hunter was facing that lawsuit from his stripper girlfriend over child support. And, the idiot, he was stupidly fighting it. And in the course of that, they got a deposition that I'm sure was very damning. He finally got killed. He's going to pay her, and she'll shut up. So that problem goes away. That's how the guys.
Do you think that they're gonna let Donald Trump to run for presidency?
Yeah. No, I think he will ultimately run. Trump. The thing that has allowed Trump to resonate is that his vision of making America great again. It's a message of hope, and it's positive. His actual accomplishments from the standpoint of the economy, where the welfare of Black Americans and Latino Americans went up, the more employment, better jobs, better paying jobs. But he is a threat to the corruption that infests Washington, D.C. It is a revolving door between members of Congress and lobbyists and corporate interests that that establishment it's so wealthy. I was just back up there. I lived in the area for 40 years, and I had to go back into the Washington, D.C. area a week ago Saturday. And it was shocking how much the kind of construction that's going on, raising the skyline around the Beltway out by Tyson's Corner, just huge buildings that are going up that carry the names of banks. There's no industry in Washington, D.C. There's no textile manufacturers. There's no mining. There's no automobile production. It's all selling government influence, selling access to government money. That's what's going on. It's really a corrupt enterprise. And Trump represents a threat to that. And that is because he doesn't need their money. And that's what they've always counted on, that they could bribe people that are in politics that aren't wealthy. Just bribe them, give them enough, find out what the price is, pay them that price, and then you control them and you own them. Trump's problem, though, was he was a terrible judge of character, terrible at selecting talent. Even though he had that television show where, he would allegedly find the best, brightest, the person who should be running his enterprise. That was a character he played on TV. In real life, he was terrible at it. Hiring the likes of John Bolton as a national security advisor, I mean, that was insane. He hired people that also lied to him and betrayed him and sabotaged him. And, I can't fault him for wanting to trust some people. Like, he trusted Bill Barr. I thought initially Bill Barr was a great selection, and now it turns out Bill Barr is a disgrace. He completely failed to follow the rule of law, completely. He let this Hunter Biden laptop thing languish. They should have been all over it. So he's just, Barr is just another example of the corruption that infests
Because
Washington.
he was surrounded by these neocons, Mike Pompeo, Bolton. These guys, they were silencing him every time he was telling why we cannot have friendship with Russia.
Yeah. Well, and that was the ultimate goal when the Clinton campaign decided to portray Trump as a stooge of Putin, as someone controlled by the Kremlin. It really handcuffed Trump for his entire presidency. He was not able to do any of the kinds of diplomatic openings with Russia that would have made the world safer and would have made the world better off. Instead, it forced him to take an antagonistic approach, an approach where Russian diplomatic personnel were thrown out of the United States, and relations became frostier, not warmer.
You see, I just the last question, Larry. You see, this two-party system, anybody can get elected. Well, it has to be, it has to go through one of these parties. You see, that's why I'm asking you, is there any chance for RFK Jr. to be the Democratic Party nomination?
I don't think the Democratic Party will allow him. So I think what opens up is the possibility of a third party movement. One sort of, let's call it outrage scenario would be for Donald Trump and RFK Jr. to come together with Trump as president, RFK Jr. as vice president, as a way to shake up the system. I know there are a lot of...
That would be a very smart choice.
Yeah, well, it would certainly be disruptive. And I think there is growing unhappiness among Republican ranks with a lot of the Republican leadership, particularly on the Senate side, the likes people of the ilk of Mitch McConnell or Mitt Romney. Most Republicans that would support Trump and them absolutely repugnant. I wouldn't support them. And by the same token, the supporters of McConnell and Romney will never support Trump. So you've got that kind of deep-seated division. But the Democrats are not any better off. I mean, they've really drifted into the land of crazy. This extreme embrace of transgenderism as normal, and they insist that LGBTQ got to have a whole month of pride about that. It's like being proud that you have black hair. Well, that's how you were born. Well, you didn't accomplish anything to have black hair. That's how you were born. You get to be proud of the fact that, hey, I've got a podcast and I bring on interesting guests. That's something that you've done. That you can be proud of. And so this entire movement of wanting people to be proud of sexual deviancy it's absurd. Future historians will write about this
Exactly.
period of debauchery and decadence in the West as one of the primary reasons for its downfall.
Thank you so much, Larry, for being with us today. It was a great pleasure to have you on.